Sense making is an important aspect of our life. We're constantly trying to make sense of so many things and so many combinations of within our own self, within our own set of experiences, and or its relationship with people around us or people at large on the planet now or in the past, or it could be making sense of things and making sense of political, economic, social systems that we are embedded in. And one of the ideas is to be able to use this sense making mechanism in order to go on the path of achieving certain goals. Now, this whole aspect of achieving certain goals could further be nuanced or hyperlinked in terms of there are things we want to do, there are things we do not want to do. So imagine we put them on x-axis, want to do, don't want to do. Then there are things on the y-axis, have to do, don't have to do. And we'll get four quadrants: want to do, have to do, want to do, don't have to do, don't want to do, have to do, don't want to do, don't have to do. And we realize that constantly we are in all the four quadrants. Very rarely, actually, we fall in the first quadrant, which is the want to do and have to do kind of quadrant. And even if we have a substantial part of our efforts, life spent on that quadrant, the other three quadrants are the most challenging ones. How do we navigate them? And in order to navigate them, we have to rely on sense making, because there are different parts, there are different hurdles to overcome, there are different step functions to complete as we go along chasing these goals, which could be on any of these quadrants. We realized very quickly that there is another axis that we have to add. Now imagine if it is the Z axis, and on that we have can do and cannot do. So now suddenly you get a three 2x2 kind of a matrix. And the idea is to see now that this ability to be able to navigate is what will fall in the can do and cannot do matrix. And if we meditate, we realize that we are constantly relying on a lot of things that borrowed from others and from the past. For example, this language that I'm using, I did not invent this language, you did not invent this language. In fact, this is one of the oldest running open source technology on the planet. And the way these words and the sentences are constructed and the sense making is brought about is a complete complex mechanism that we have been using for a long period of time. Similarly, we try to navigate the world and try to use a lot of open source or not so open source technologies, concepts, and try to use them in the service of our grid that we constructed. But then over a period of time, a lot of people have this first person account and felt experience of constantly being in the service of have to do. And they're depleting can do abilities, which means going down the path of cannot do it or cannot do it anymore. So the moment they arrive there, which is a exhausting combination of have to do and cannot do, slowly and slowly go farther and farther from want to do. And this gap keeps a person on the edge. And if a person does not have coping mechanism to be able to sail this triad of want, have, can, then you could see the maladaptive outcomes of these. The maladaptive outcomes could be inside the person or in the person, or it could be inflicted outside of the person. Now, the outside of the person could be their in-group or out-group or ecology or civilization at large. And it could take forms of underperforming or performing only when somebody's watching, or performing with a very tightly coupled reciprocity, give and take kind of relationships, very measured, very accounted for, but then lack of taking initiative, lack of doing, going on the path of doing duty. And then there are other places where at some point the person feels that it's a complete meltdown and breakdown of whatever the person has been doing for so many years and so many weeks and months. And at this point, the person is looking for a new narrative. Now, this new narrative could come from any place. In fact, one of the observations that we have, actually, we had two key observations in the last 8 years of our journey. The first one being that if life back then, which is thousands of years, If life back then was simple, easy, then you would not require voluminous documents to explain what is life and how to live. I'm referring to the ancient texts, which are scriptures, which are could be religious, could be spiritual, and those documents are in the service of explaining something about life, some things about inner journey and the way a person navigates one's journey on the planet. Of course, I'm not saying that all the ancient documents are without motivation, and there are no cases where you can question those motivations of the use of the document and or the origins of those documents. We're not going there. I'm pointing out to the complexity of it being so voluminous and so descriptive and so nuanced, and yet leaving a lot to interpretation. And the second aspect is, in the last 10 years, we've seen that the sales of self motivation, self help, self development, books, retreats, workshops going through the roof. Now, this is telling something. This is telling us that people's want, have, can grid now sort of melting in some manner. And if we were to connect this to Freud, almost a century ago, Freud had, I think it was one of his essays, Civilization and its Discontent. He makes the point that over a period of time, a person has or experiences decay of sorts, loss of meaning of sorts, and the person wants to belong. There is this need to belong to something. There is a need to belong to something more powerful, more ocean-like, and that which will give the person the comfort of that it's some unimaginable terrain, scale, dimension. There is an order. There is a certainty, because what a person keeps experiencing through the days and weeks in life is consistent loss of order, consistent loss of normal, and shocks coming from everywhere, accidents in different places of performances or relationships of all sorts. The flip side to this is that when a person has subliminally signed up for immediately catching a narrative, there are possibilities of the person falling in trap of people wanting to peddle their cult, or people wanting to peddle false narrative. And that is where we get unquestioned, unreflected, uncontemplated following of some form of narrative, some person, some ideology. It is also important to mention here that it's not the case that I think the way to see this is on a consistent basis, whether one is in the paradigm of the popular, conventional, or the paradigm of the unpopular and the unconventional. Is there a form of practice? Is there a form of seeing the person is able to develop in order to see one's own blind spots and others' blind spots? And this is important. Another way to look at this would be the people that we follow. Are those people constantly just filling in content for you? Because then it would turn out to be the case that you left a narrative which you experimented in the past and you bought into it, or maybe you did not buy into it, but you had to do it because of some reason, but you did not go deep. And it's happening again. I believe that certain human beings you could find are helpful because they constantly qualify what they speak. They talk about their limitations. They talk about their own change of beliefs. They talk about how and when they have been wrong. They also share tools for you to arrive at your own analysis, at your own judgment. They do not call the final judgment. And I think that's what I see missing today. And if I were to just plot it again on x-axis and y-axis, you will have, let's say on the x-axis you have followers, and y-axis you have leaders stroke influencers. And the way to look at them, the frame, the filter that one can use is reflective and reflexive. So you have reflective followers and reflexive followers, reflective leaders and reflexive leaders. Again, I'm not being naive here, or I think I used to be naive and I am still naive on so many other counts. But on this particular account here, we should not be naive that reflections are always powered by best ethics. You can have a reflective leader, but because precisely why there is reflection by the leader, it could be weaponized. So the idea is to also use the filter that such things are not being weaponized and overall is in the service of adaptive, better civilization.